What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down some very important data coming out for tomorrow that's going to affect the markets in Tesla, what's going on with the markets when it comes to earnings, what you should be watching for as we approach tomorrow, and the FOMC meeting. But before I break things down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. This offer ends in just 24 hours, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. So Tesla was down 4.8% for the day, and we have a very critical support to be watching for on Tesla's weekly chart. That's going to be the 200 EMA. We closed just barely above it, and Tesla's still looking weak as a result of that. But the question for tomorrow is going to be, will Tesla break and hold below the 200 EMA, or is Tesla going to try to bounce off of this? It's going to be very important for this big test going into tomorrow. So I will be talking more about this, just looking at the current setup on Tesla and how things are looking. But let's first talk about the news and stuff like that. So Panasonic came out and mentioned that it's going to slow battery production amidst the weaker EV business, but Tesla still looks good according to this article. This is very important because them slowing down their battery production is a sign of weaker demand for the EVs. And they're still hinting that demand from the Tesla is still going to be very good from that front. But this was still very negative for the EV sector, especially because it produces battery cells for EVs in like Japan and China and the US as well. It partners with Tesla to produce its cells for the Model 3 and the Model Y. And this is happening at Gigafactory in Nevada. But overall, this is just not the best of news because it led to some concerns about the EV sector as a whole, and it could even affect Tesla in the future. So this is very important. There's also this news coming out about the UAW strikes potentially reaching Tesla in the future, possibly. There are no guarantees just yet about this, as other individuals and other groups have been against, getting Tesla involved. But if it were to happen, that would be even more negative news for Tesla. So with all these concerns, all the negative news coming out involving Tesla's margins and such, and Tesla's earnings, it still has a ripple effect on how Tesla's moving right now, and still leading to Tesla selling off alongside all this new stuff coming out. So that's why Tesla sold off the way it did. But the question is, what's going to happen for the future? Let's first talk about some earnings. So as a reminder, we have Pfizer in the morning for earnings and just a couple of others like JetBlue and Caterpillar. But then for after the market closes, we have AMD, Paycom, and just a couple of others. So make sure you watch all of these very carefully if you're interested. Nothing's going to be too significant though until like Wednesday, because that's when we have like PayPal and Roku, the bigger ones, alongside Apple. For Thursday, it's going to be much more significant. But for now, it's just going to be a couple of smaller ones for Tuesday. Now, also for Tuesday, which is tomorrow, we have a lot of data coming up before the market opens. We have the employment cost, benefits, and wages report quarter over quarter, which is going to be somewhat important, at least for these different sectors and the Fed, but not like super, super insane. Later on, at about 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, we have the house price index coming out. This report is going to be important for housing. And then the real data that's going to be important for the markets starts at 9:45 a.m. So we have the Chicago PMI report coming out. This is going to be very important 15 minutes after the market opens. Then at 10 o'clock a.m., we have consumer confidence coming out, giving us an understanding of how sentiment is looking amongst consumers. And last but not least, we have the Dallas Fed services data, giving us ideas about how the services sectors are looking for the stock market, the economy, and etc. This is going to be very important. So watch for some high volatility 15 minutes after market open, 30 minutes after open, and an hour after the stock market opens. That's pretty much it for data. After that, the data is going to be very quiet until Wednesday, when we start to see some JOLTS job openings and the FOMC meeting when Jerome Powell gives a speech. All right, so it's going to be very important for Wednesday. It's going to be a massive day for the whole stock market, and anything could happen when Powell speaks. So you want to be very careful. But at least for tomorrow, the market is going to be preparing for it. We could see some hedging with some selling here and there, like right before the close, and we'll see how this data affects us. Now, when it comes to sentiment, the market is less fearful than before. We're just fearful right now, not extremely fearful. But our other indicators, such as the stock price Brent and the McClellan volume summation index, are suggesting the market's in a bottoming process and a bounce should be coming very soon, possibly thanks to the Fed that could cause that. The puts and call options are still at these highs as we're starting to see puts being bought still, but now it's starting to decrease a bit as the call buying is starting to go up just slightly, but nothing too crazy. Moving forward, if you look at the current election cycle, and this relates to like midterms, also like presidential elections and etc., the market tends to bottom near the end of October, at least historically, during this type of cycle. And that's what happened so far. So 409 could be the bottom for SPY. And we could be seeing a very, very nice, uptrend for November/December. We're almost there, and it could be starting very soon. Hopefully, it could be, the Fed that causes that. If it is what it is. If not, then we'll just have to continue to just read our indicators and see how things look. But I do lean more bullish for November. I think something big could be brewing. We'll see what Jerome Powell and the Fed cause. Morgan Stanley and Wedbush are still giving Tesla an overweight rating, saying that Tesla is going to eventually outperform the markets. As of right now, it's not doing that because the price pairs ratio is dropping, meaning Tesla has lost a lot of relative strength. Tesla is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. This is just showing a big decline. And if anything, even though this is the case for Tesla, it could decline more. I just want to note that this isn't the end of the world. Things could shift with the Fed, even for Tesla, but we'll have to be very patient, especially as we approach that. Compared to SPY, Tesla was underperforming today. On Tuesdays, we tend to be green only 51% of the time, so it's like a coin flip. Watch for high volatility around noon for Tesla, for Eastern time, and also 2 p.m. And don't forget, November tends to be a stronger month as we're green 61% of the time in November, compared to October when we're green only 36% of the time. So October tends to be weaker, November tends to be stronger, and Tesla's volume was 136 million, so we saw some aggressive selling on Tesla. Now let's break down the technicals. How is Tesla looking? So here's the thing about Tesla, okay? We look a little bearish on the weekly so far. There's no true sign of a major bounce yet, unless we get a big bounce from here. But we're going to be watching something very important. Tesla is very close to this red line. Here you guys can see this line. This is going to be the 200 EMA on the weekly time frame. The trend is more bearish as of right now, but we want to be watching to see if Tesla holds this. We closed just at where it is, super, super close to it. So if we lose this 196.76 area and we break below it and fail to hold it, Tesla's going to be sinking, in my opinion, to get very close to about 190. If we hold this, if we kind of like come below it like we did today, but come right back up quickly, and we don't truly see a big bearish move below it, there's going to be potential for Tesla to try to bounce and make its way back up to kind of range trade a bit and maybe try to get back up to 200, similar to what we did today. So it's either going to continue to range trade or it sells off more. We're going to be watching that very carefully for tomorrow. Now, I just want to call out that when you look at the pattern on Tesla's hourly chart, we have a potential bearish pennant forming. If you look at this, we're forming this pennant right here. We had this like sell-off beforehand, and we could see something like this for Tesla, right? We have the flagpole, the pennant, and the breakout to the downside if we end up breaking below support, and that's going to be confirmation. So basically, what I would say is you're going to be watching our 200 EMA. I'm going to be watching to see if Tesla gets this break to the downside or not. If we do end up breaking below this support right here tomorrow, we start sinking, you're going to be watching that key support at 195. And if we lose that alongside the 200 EMA, Tesla's going to be sinking towards the low 190s. And if 190 fails us, 186 is on the table. All right. So I know it's not what you want to hear, but that is a real possibility. We just have to be prepared. And that's going to be a full measured move down if that were to happen. Now, it is looking a bit more bearish from a technical standpoint, but just to be safe, if you want to turn bullish, you want to see Tesla get above 198 and hold it and then break above 200. If we could close above 200, that's going to give us some life. But as of right now, the technicals are looking a little bit more bearish, looking at the weekly, but we need to see if support holds. So I want to be very careful going into tomorrow for Tesla. There is a risk of downside. Now, for SPY, I just want to call out that the daily made an attempt to bounce, but there is a bearish divergence that formed, so there's going to be a little risk of somewhat of a move to the downside maybe in the morning. We have a nice inverse head and shoulder structure, so overall, guys, I'm bullish. I think that the odds favor a nice bounce after FOMC, but before we see FOMC on Wednesday, there could be a slight sell-off. There might be a slight sell-off first. So we're going to be watching this 414 support. If we lose this, watch 413.3, then 412.5. If we lose 412.5, that's going to be quite bearish. We could start sinking towards like 411 before we try to bounce. But watch that support very carefully. I think we're going to start sinking just a little bit, either to 414, 413.3, one of those two levels. And we might see a bounce either there, or it could be at 412.5. But if we lose 412.5, we're going to turn bearish. I hope that's as clear as possible. I think we're going to drop and bounce. That's the most likely possibility. And I think that we're going to see some buyers trying to defend, but I don't think it's going to be as strong as what we've seen in the past because of the fact that we're approaching FOMC and there could be some like hedging going on. So just be very careful. But that's what I'm anticipating looking at the current technicals. On the QQQ, we're just going to look at the QQQ real quick. The daily looks like it's trying to rebound, but it's getting rejected off the 5 EMA. We're going to be watching this very carefully at this 350 resistance. So looking at the QQQ, we have this resistance at 350. We have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. So it looks bullish from a technical standpoint. It may cool off first though. So you're going to be watching 348. If we lose 348, watch support at 346.5. If we lose that, watch the gap to get filled at 345 and then 344 below that. For resistance, watch 350. If we break that, watch 352 and then 353.5. This looks like it's going to break out to the upside later, but for the short term, maybe like tomorrow, we might start off just with a little cool off. We might cool off just a little bit, retest 348 or so, and then bounce and start pushing up maybe after FOMC. That's what this is trying to suggest, because we're eventually going to make our way up to like 356, 357, maybe by Friday, if not by early next week. Before we start to uptrend after FOMC, we might see a slight pullback. So I'm just warning you about a slight little pullback. There's also a gap below it to be watching for, but it's going to be very minor in my opinion, nothing too serious. For a couple of other tickers like Nvda is looking kind of decent. If you look at the daily chart, Nvda has a doji forming, same thing on the weekly. Some signals suggest that we could see this thing reverse, but we need to see a follow-through move. We're not necessarily ready just yet. So for Nvidia, I think it's going to make a similar move as SPY, where it kind of like cools off a little bit, retests either 405 or 407, and then it tries to bounce and starts pushing up towards this 421 plus area. I think it's going to eventually break out towards 420 over the next couple of days, maybe over the next week. But before it does this, it might pull back a little bit before that bounce comes. Now we have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. We have a nice double bottom with the inverse head and shoulders. So it could pull back a little bit, then bounce and start pushing up. That's the most probable move. Make sure you watch these levels, by the way. This like 407 as key support. We have some support at 410 and 407, 405 below that, and 402. I think 405 is the strongest support out of those three, and we'll see if that holds. For resistance, watch 414, 416.8 to about 417, 420 to 422.5, and then 425. I think it may cool off a bit, and we may see buyers step in later on, hopefully by like Wednesday after FOMC. Aapl is basically in a channel. We should not assume Apple's going to break out of it unless it truly happens. We'll see a buyer step in for Aapl and try to launch it back up towards 172. What could happen is it kind of breaks below it temporarily towards like 169.5, then it bounces back in. That could also happen, so we'll be watching this very carefully. But as of right now, Apple's looking bullish as it's on an uptrend. We're making higher highs and higher lows, so we're going to be watching this very carefully. And by the way, supports to be watching for is at 169.25. If we lose that, watch 169 and 167.8 below that. That's pretty much it for the main five I tend to talk about the most. Just know that Tesla's looking a little bit weak, but we have to be watching for confirmation at the 200 EMA on the weekly time frame. Watch that support very carefully. Let's see if Tesla breaks this or not. As of right now, it's trying to hold up. Now, for just a couple of others, guys, I want to make this video kind of quick, so I'm just going to be very brief. Microsoft is looking a little bullish on the weekly. It looks like it's going to respect an uptrend, but I could see a slight little pullback towards like 335, then a bounce for 340 after that. AMD could trade a little sideways since it has earnings and not a whole lot tends to happen approaching it, at least for this stock typically. The dollar index is on a slight downtrend. We'll be watching to see if this breaks down or not, because we have a potential kind of slanted head and shoulders here. So if it does continue to break down to the full measured move, could mean that there's more upside coming to the markets, but watch and see if 106 holds. Since we're at support, we could rebound a bit. Maybe the market pulls back a little bit. And if this starts sinking later on, that could be because of the market bouncing as time goes on. So the market is bullish overall, but we might sink a little bit first before we get that bullish move. For Coinbase, this is trying to crawl a bit, look for a little retracement towards 72.5, then a bounce. And over the next few days, I anticipate it's going to come up to 76.5 towards this imbalance, towards the 200 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. So I'm seeing a potential bounce. It's also looking kind of good on the daily chart. You can see it right here. Looks like it wants to bounce, so I anticipate more upside potentially coming for it. For just a couple of others like Google, I anticipate that Google will eventually make its way back up towards the 50 EMA. So let's just actually go back to the modern day. I think my chart went really far back. Not sure why, but it's curling, looking like it's trying to make its way up. If we break 126 on the 20 EMA, then we're going to be watching for 130 to be coming. I think there is some potential for upside. We want to be watching for that bounce. For Amazon, we're going to be watching this 133 resistance. If we manage to break above this, we have some resistance at 134.5 and then 135. I think Amazon could backtest 131.22 or the 5 EMA, then bounce and start pushing up for 135 later on over the next couple of days. And last but not least, for Meta is still struggling to break above the 200 EMA. It may backtest 300, if not 298, then bounce. And then we're going to be watching to see what the FOMC causes, because that's going to cause a much bigger move. If Powell and the Fed pump this thing, watch and see if it can break 306. If it manages to hold above this and close above this, it's going to be bullish. We're going to be watching for a push to about 312 plus or the historical resistance. All right, so it depends on the Fed and Jerome Powell. With that said, guys, have a great day. Just know Tesla's a little weak as of right now, but watch and see if support holds. Finally, the last thing I'll say is we have FOMC on Wednesday. That's when we have the very big Fed meeting and Jerome Powell making the big rate hike decision announcement and his important speech. Okay, so that's going to be very important. We'll see what that causes for the markets. And for now, like I say, as always, remain calm, cool, and collected, guys, and do what you have to do. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys the next one tomorrow morning. Thanks, and peace out.